Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going on a bit of a journey. Back in time, of course,
Hmm.
but not to the usual suspects. Not Rome, not Greece,
No.
a land that's shrouded in mystery.
Yeah. Mystery and, well, gold.
Ooh, gold. Always a good hook. We're talking about Thrace.
That's right, and I'm excited to delve into this.
Me too, especially with you, a leading expert on Thracian archaeology.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just like reading a textbook, right? We've got ancient Greek writings. We've got archaeology.
You've even got some insights into their burial practices. It's going to be a really fascinating deep dive.
The first things first. When we think about the ancient world, we often think of Greece. The philosophers, the democracy, the art.
Right.
But Thrace, well, they were right there next door.
Yeah, they were neighbors.
And often they get, I don't know, kind of lumped in as barbarians.
It's easy to fall into that trap,
Huh.
especially with how the Greeks sometimes portrayed them.
Right. Like in Homer, the Iliad.
Yeah.
You've got these Thracian kings helping out the Trojans, all decked out in fancy armor, almost like mythical figures.
But is that the whole story? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. That's where someone like Thucydides comes in, right? He's giving us more of a grounded perspective. And wasn't he actually, like, personally involved in Thrace?
He was. He actually owned a silver mine there. Imagine that. A historian who is also a silver mine owner gives you a different perspective.
Wow. Talk about getting your hands dirty with research.
Right. But yeah, Thucydides, he doesn't just see them as these wild warriors. He talks about their political power.
Okay. So more than just muscle.
Oh, yeah. Remember the Peloponnesian War?
Of course. Huge conflict.
Well, there was this Thracian king, Sitalces. He almost changed the entire course of the war with his army.
Hold on. So these guys weren't just raiding parties. They were a major force.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so interesting. They were players on the big stage. And a lot of that, comes back to the land itself.
Okay, so Thrace wasn't just some, like, empty field.
No way. It was wealthy. Fertile plains, perfect for agriculture. And they had resources coming out their ears. Silver, iron, gold, you name it, they had it.
Ah, so that explains all the gold we see in those ancient depictions.
It wasn't just for show. It was real wealth. And that wealth fueled their military.
Makes sense. More resources, more troops.
Exactly. They could afford a powerful cavalry, light infantry.
So those swift movements, hit-and-run tactics.
That was them. Agile, skilled.
And of course, we can't forget the Romphia.
Ah, yes. The Romphia.
Our listeners might not know this, but picture a curved sword. Like a scimitar, but sometimes even on a pole.
Yeah, intimidating.
I bet. You wouldn't want to be on the other end of that thing.
And it tells you something about their tactics, right?
What do you mean?
Well, it was great against heavily armored opponents. Hook shields, pull them down, create openings.
So smart, not just strong.
Exactly.
And, even today, that region, it's still known for its richness. Think of the Valley of Roses.
It's a beautiful area.
So the connection to the land, it's still there.
It really is. But, we often think of them as all these separate tribes, but they did unite, at least for a while.
Right. The Udrician Kingdom.
Right after the Persian Wars, all these tribes came together, one dynasty.
And that lasted for a while, right?
Over a century.
Which is wild, because that's when Alexander the Great is around, the Persian Empire is falling apart.
Huge events.
And the Ugrisians, they're right there in the middle of it all.
And yet, they're often overlooked.
Hidden history at its finest.
Yeah, it really is.
But speaking of bringing things to light, this is where we get to the fun part. The treasure.
Oh, yes.
And we've got a great one to start with. The Panegyriște treasure.
That's a mouthful.
I know, right? But picture this. It's the late 1940s. You're a farmer in Bulgaria. And you stumble upon these incredible gold drinking vessels, all decorated with scenes from Greek mythology.
It's like something out of a movie.
It really is.
Yeah.
But these weren't just some, rough chunks of gold.
No, these were masterpieces.
It really speaks to the skill of those Thracian artisans.
And their connection to the wider world. They weren't isolated. They were trading, interacting.
Makes you wonder what those feasts were like, huh?
Golden goblets, delicious food. Must have been quite the party.
But hold on, because we've got another treasure. And this one is even more mysterious.
Oh, more mysterious than golden goblets.
I think so. The enigmatic head of Soothiz III. Now that's a name. It's a bronze head, a portrait of king. And the detail is incredible.
One of the earliest surviving portraits we have.
But here's the thing. It wasn't found on a statue or anything like that.
Where was it?
At the entrance to his tomb. Just kind of sitting there.
Okay, that's a little creepy.
Right. So what's the deal?
Well, there's a theory, and it's a fascinating one.
Lay it on me.
This wasn't just a decoration, this was a prophetic head.
Prophetic, you mean like it could tell the future?
Not exactly. The idea is that the head, it embodies the king's power, even in death. Like his spirit lives on through it.
So not just creepy, but powerful too.
Yeah. A way to ensure that even in the afterlife, the king's influence continued.
Makes you think about their whole concept of death, doesn't it?
It really does. They weren't just tossing bodies in the ground.
Right. And that brings us to the Thracian way of death, which was, well, anything but ordinary.
They went all out, especially for the elite.
We're talking about tumuli.
Giant earth mounds.
Imagine huge hills dotting the landscape, and inside, these intricate stone chambers. Some even have wall paintings.
Like their version of the Egyptian pyramids.
Exactly. But it makes you wonder,
Mm-hmm.
what about the everyday Thracian? The farmer, the artisan? Did they get the royal treatment too?
That's the mystery. We know a lot about the elite burials, but the common folks, not so much.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
And it just makes you want to find those pieces, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's amazing to think, about all this, the grandeur, the mystery.
It really is.
But of course, we can't talk about Thrace without mentioning one very famous Thracian,
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
a name that echoes through history. Spartacus.
The gladiator. The rebel.
His story is just, well, incredible.
A slave who stood up to Rome, led a revolt.
It's inspiring, even today. That fight for freedom. But there's another layer here, isn't there?
What do you mean?
Well, Spartacus, he wasn't just any gladiator. He was Thracian.
Right. And that background, it probably played a huge role in his success.
Think about everything we've been discussing. The warrior ethos, the skill in battle, the cunning.
Those aren't just traits, they're part of their identity.
And don't forget the guerrilla warfare, those hit-and-run tactics. Imagine being a Roman soldier.
Frustrating, I bet. You chase them into the forests and poof, they're gone.
Exactly. So how much of Spartacus's success can we attribute to those Thracian roots?
It's hard to say for sure, but you can't deny the connection.
But there's a flip side to guerrilla warfare.
Right.
Well, it's great for disruption, but can you build an empire with it?
That's a good point.
The Thracians, they stayed mostly fragmented, right? Lots of tribes, not one big power.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of the reason why. Guerrilla tactics, they're good for defense, for harassment.
But not for conquering and holding vast territories. Fascinating how these things play out.
It really is.
But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about kings and warriors, but what about everyone else?
The everyday folks.
Right. Was Thrace a rigid society? Or was there some flexibility?
It's tricky. We know figures like Suthes III, they had a lot of power, especially during the Odrysian kingdom.
But there were other players too, right?
Oh, yeah. Local chieftains, nobles, they had their own influence.
So not a simple hierarchy, more like layers of power.
Competing for resources, influence.
But what about the farmers, the artisans? What do we know about them?
Sadly, not as much as we'd like. Most of our sources, they focus on the elites.
The Greeks, they were writing about the people they interacted with.
The kings, the ambassadors.
So the lives of everyday Thracians, there's still a bit of a mystery.
A frustrating one, but that's part of the challenge, isn't it?
And that goes for their religion too, right?
What did they believe? Who did they worship?
Did they adopt the Greek gods or did they have their own thing going on?
It's a mix, actually. You see some parallels, like Sabazios, often linked to Dionysus.
The god of wine and ecstasy.
Exactly.
So some borrowing, some adapting.
But there are also uniquely Thracian deities. Bendis, for example.
No Greek equivalent there?
Nope. A reminder that they had their own distinct beliefs.
But what did those beliefs look like in practice?
What were their rituals, their myths?
That's where the sources are a bit thin, unfortunately.
We get hints, tantalizing glimpses. But the details, they're still elusive.
Imagine finding a Thracian temple complex.
Yeah.
Inscriptions, artifacts.
That would be incredible. A real breakthrough.
That's the dream, right? To piece together those missing parts of the story.
And who knows what amazing discoveries are still out there waiting for us.
We've really gone deep on the Thracians themselves, but we can't forget about the bigger picture.
Right, their interactions with other cultures.
Exactly. They bumped up against the Greeks, obviously, and then, well, Rome came knocking.
And eventually absorbed them.
Right. But did the Thracians just disappear? Or did they leave a mark on those other cultures?
That's a great question. And, we often focus on how the Thracians were influenced.
Yeah, like they just took in everything from their neighbors.
But it's a two-way street.
So what they gave back too?
Exactly. Think about the cult of Sabazios.
Ah, the Thracian god we talked about, linked to Dionysus.
Right. Wine, ecstasy, all that fun stuff.
Well, that cult, it actually became quite popular in Rome.
Especially among the lower classes. Seems like those Roman citizens were ready to party too.
Makes sense. So a Thracian god finds a home in the Roman Empire.
Interesting. And it shows you how these religious ideas, they can jump borders.
They adapt, they find new meanings.
Exactly. So Rome wasn't just imposing its beliefs on everyone.
They were taking in new things too. Makes you wonder what else they picked up from the Thracians.
Oh, I'm sure there are things we haven't even considered. Think about it. Trade routes, military service.
People moving back and forth.
Exactly. And the Romans, they were practical. If it worked, they used it, no matter where it came from.
So even in defeat, the Thracians left their mark. That's a powerful thought.
It really is. History is rarely black and white. It's messy, it's complicated.
But then that raises another question. If they were so influential, why did they decline? Was it all Rome?
Well, Rome was a factor, for sure. But the Thracians, they were already facing problems.
Internal struggles?
Yeah, divisions, economic pressures, alliances shifting, it all adds up.
Makes them vulnerable.
Exactly. And then a powerful force like Rome comes along.
And that's the tipping point. It's a reminder that nothing lasts forever, even the greatest empires.
It's true.
Well, this has been an incredible journey, from those glittering treasures to the mysteries of their beliefs. It's clear the Thracians were far more than just a side note.
They were a vibrant civilization, a complex story that we're still piecing together.
And that's the exciting part. There's always more to learn. And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will make the next big discovery.
It could happen.
So, if you're intrigued by what you've heard, don't stop here. Keep exploring. There's a whole world of Thracian history out there, just waiting to be uncovered.